Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Exum, let me ask you this. In your testimony, you pointed out one way in which Russia and Iran collaborate to destabilize the Middle East. You mentioned that Russia provides Iran with anti-access, area denial weapons, like anti-ship cruise missiles and air defense systems. Obviously, this is very disconcerting to us and our allies because their goal is having and using these weapons to inhibit freedom of movement in strategic waterways and airways. There have been Russian media reports that Iran and Russia are in discussions over a $10 billion deal in weapons. How would you suggest the Trump administration respond to this?
Well, I think one of the things that the Trump administration can do, and here with respect to sanctions, I'd defer to the sanctions experts because I'm sure that there are aspects outside of the military lane that you can use. I think with respect to diplomacy, I'll just focus on diplomacy and the military steps that I think you can take. With respect to diplomacy, by constraining the access to waterways and look, we don't need the oil that's coming out of the oil and gas that's coming out of the Persian Gulf as much as the global markets need them, and as much as we need them for the stability of the global economy. So it's not just the United States or the Trump administration that has a stake in this, that has a stake in freedom of navigation and freedom of commerce in and around the Arabian Peninsula. I would think that you would start with a large multilateral effort to pressure Iran on the deployment of these weapon systems and on Russia on the sales of these weapon systems. From a military perspective, we're already doing quite a lot. Again, I don't think that the commander of NAVCENT would argue that his freedom of movement is in any way constrained right now, but it's clear that we need to do two things. We need to increase the degree to which we have ballistic and air missile or integrated air and missile defense systems within the Middle East. That includes both sales to partners and increasing partner capacity, but it also means that our partners in the region need to get more serious about their own maritime capabilities. Historically, maritime capabilities, the Navy has been the third of three services within most of our Gulf militaries. They need to get serious about their own efforts to be able to keep the waterways in and around the Arabian Peninsula secure. And I would defer again, like I said, to my Treasury colleagues and my colleagues from the Washington Institute with respect to what more we can do in terms of sanctioning those Russian businesses or those Iranians that are purchasing these types of weapon systems, Mr. Ranking Member.
Thank you. Anybody else have comments on that?
Mr. Ranking Member, the only thing I would say is it's a very asymmetric process that Iran is involved in. That includes commercial acquisition of conventional military stuff. I think, building on what Dr. Exum is saying, I think we have not done enough to work with our allies in the region, particularly in the GCC, who is often the site of enabling Iran to do these things through front companies based in their own emirates, for instance, to develop the capabilities to work asymmetrically in a defensive capacity. And I don't think that we're systematically oriented in that sense.
Thank you. Mr. Albright, let me ask you this. You've criticized the IAEA for a lack of transparency in reporting, and I quote you, this is what you said, "The IAEA reporting continues to lack critical technical details about implementation of the agreement. This lack of information in the IAEA reports, combined with the secrecy surrounding the decision-making of the Joint Commission, is a serious shortcoming in the implementation of the JCPOA and erodes support for this important deal," unquote. Let me ask you this. What information is missing from IAEA reporting, and what information do you need to be made public? What specific recommendations do you have for the Trump administration and Congress to encourage more transparency so that experts like you can better evaluate the implementation?
Well, in my testimony, there's a footnote. I apologize for making it a footnote, but essentially the IA is not reporting on almost any of the technical details that it used to report on, levels of enriched uranium, controversies with Iran. I mean, Iran's pushing limits of the JCPOA. IA may or may not be pushing back, but it could report on the status of that. So I would say that they're providing almost very little information. On heavy water, we hear a lot, well, they're over, the cap of 130 tons by 100 kilograms. They leave out 70 tons was sent off to Oman in a kind of a clever trick that in essence allowed Iran to be 70 tons over the cap on heavy water. If you judge that cap by the heavy water Iran owns and controls. So I think that it not only has there's a lack of information inhibiting analysis, the lack of information, I think, is providing a false narrative about where things are at, and we need a lot more information. Now, I will say under pressure, some from Congress, some from us, some from the media, the Joint Commission did decide in December to start releasing its major decisions publicly. I mean, I don't think they wanted to do that, but I think that they felt the absolute need to do it. And so I think pressure does work in this case, and I think the Trump administration should push for much more openness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. We go to